The clock reads 4:27 a.m. The city of Greyhaven hangs suspended in the dirty yellow glow of its streetlights, holding its breath before the dawn. For Mira Solis, the silence of the EMT ready room is a thin blanket, barely settled over her eyes when the klaxon rips it away. The sound is a physical assault, metallic and unforgiving. The first call of the shift, a multi-vehicle collision. Halcyon Tunnel. Mira is upright before her mind fully registers the alarm. There is no panic, only process. The muscle memory of 1,000 adrenaline-fueled mornings takes over. Her movements are economical, precise as a surgeon's. She snaps on blue nitrile gloves, the sound sharp in the quiet room. She checks her jump bag, her fingers dancing over ampules and gauze packets. By feel alone. She sweeps her dark hair back, twisting it into a tight, severe bun at the nape of her neck. She is alone in this moment, as she is in most. Her rented room in Dock 9 is a testament to a life lived in transit. The walls are paper thin, carrying the arguments of neighbors she has never met. The radiator hisses and clicks, fighting a losing battle against the damp chill that creeps in from the nearby river. It is a room meant for sleeping, not for living, and it suits her fine. The Halcyon Tunnel is a concrete artery clogged with shattered glass and twisted steel. Smoke, acrid and oily, stings her eyes as she steps out of the ambulance. She moves past the flashing lights, her focus narrowing, the chaos of sirens and shouting fading to a dull roar. Her patient is trapped, pinned behind the steering wheel of a sedan that looks more like a crushed can than a car. She slides through the space where the passenger door used to be, ignoring the mangled metal tearing at her jacket. "Sir, can you hear me? My name is Mira. I'm an EMT." The man is conscious, groaning, his face a mask of blood. She does not see the expensive watch on his wrist or the signet ring. She just sees the compromised airway, the rapid, thready pulse she finds in his throat. This is Luca Valente, the youngest brother of Greyhaven's shadow ruler. But to Mira, he's just a set of vitals. She works swiftly, stabilizing his neck, securing an IV line. Her voice a calm, steady monotone, issuing orders to the firefighters working to cut him free. Then the sound of the scene shifts. A new vibration thrums through the pavement. A convoy of black SUVs, identical and menacing, slices through the blockade, stopping with a squeal of tires that sets Mira's teeth on edge. The doors open in unison. Men in dark suits spill out, forming a perimeter. From the lead vehicle steps Nero Valente. He is the epicenter of the sudden cold. The tunnel air seems to drop 10 degrees. He is tall, dressed in a suit so dark it seems to drink the flashing lights. His sleeves are rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and two pale scars that run parallel, like brackets, enclosing a history of violence. He is the boss of the Valente Syndicate, a man whose name is spoken in whispers, a man who owns judges, cops, and half the skyline. His eyes, the color of wet steel, sweep the wreckage. They pass over the flashing lights, the firefighters, and Mira Solis, seeing her with the same relevance as a piece of debris. He sees the car, sees his brother, and starts forward. "Do not move him." Mira's voice cuts through the air, sharp and absolute. She does not look up from her patient, her hands steady as she bags him. Nero stops. The men behind him freeze. No one speaks. The only sound is the whine of the hydraulic cutters. Nero Valente, a man who has not been given an order in a decade, stares at the back of the small woman in the blue uniform. "I have seen command," Mira says, her voice muffled slightly as she leans in to check Luca's pupils. "Nobody touches the patient until I clear him for transport. Back away from the vehicle." Nero's jaw tightens. A muscle ticks beneath the stubble on his cheek. He is shocked, not by the command, but by the sheer, oblivious authority behind it. She did not just defy him, she dismissed him. She did not even look at him. He takes a single, measured step back, yielding the ground. His steel-gray eyes fix on her, trying to reconcile the force of her words with the small, pale wrist he can see, where a slight, persistent tremor betrays the adrenaline coursing through her. When Luca is finally extricated and strapped to the backboard, Mira straightens up. She signs the handover clipboard offered by a paramedic, her movements clipped. She finally glances at the man in the suit, her expression neutral. Professional. Nero nods once, a curt, dismissive gesture. Good. It is the only word he speaks. He turns his back on her, his attention already on his brother being loaded into the ambulance. His mind on the retribution this night will demand. He does not ask her name. He does not offer thanks. He does not see her. Back at the EMT station, the coffee is sludge, but it is hot. Her colleague, Jonas, nudges her with his elbow. You know who that was? Right, you just told Nero Valente to stand down. Mira strips off her gloves, dropping them into a biohazard bin. She shrugs, the tension of the call finally unspooling from her shoulders. I tell anyone with a pulse who gets in my way to stand down. Jonas, they all bleed the same. That night, the undercurrents of Greyhaven's digital chatter roar to life. Every live stream, every blog, every dark corner of the web is buzzing. The crash was no accident. It was a message, a failed hit orchestrated by the rival Cade outfit. The city braces for a war. For Mira, it was just another call, another life balanced on the knife edge of her training. But for Nero, sitting in the sterile quiet of a hospital waiting room, an unfamiliar image intrudes upon his thoughts of strategy and blood. A small woman, covered in soot, her voice cutting through chaos, the girl he had intentionally looked through, the girl who had, for one impossible moment, held command over his world. The following day, the threat of war settled over Greyhaven like a coat of grime. You could feel it in the way people walked, heads down, avoiding eye contact. The tension sent a ripple of need to the places that offered shelter. Mira, running on fumes and black coffee, picked up an extra shift at the Lantern Clinic in East Gables. The Lantern was a small beacon of warmth in a neighborhood bracing for the worst. Its waiting room was overflowing, not with gunshot wounds, but with the collateral damage of fear, chronic conditions exacerbated by stress, parents seeking vaccinations they had put off, the elderly desperate for reassurance. Mira moved through the quiet chaos, a center of calm. She was bandaging the sprained ankle of a young boy who had fallen trying to keep up with his hurried mother. She was focused, her voice low and soothing, demonstrating to the boy how he could wiggle his toes. She did not look up when the front bell chimed, announcing an arrival that subtly shifted the air in the room. Nero Valente did not enter places like this, yet here he was, standing just inside the doorway, flanked by two men who remained on the threshold. He was dressed down. If one could call a tailored cashmere coat and dark trousers dressing down, he held a simple white envelope. His eyes scanned the room, absorbing the worn linoleum, the faded health posters, the scent of antiseptic and stale coffee. He was here to make a donation, an anonymous gesture his accountants insisted was good for the community portfolio. But his gaze snagged, against his will, on the woman in the blue scrubs kneeling on the floor. He watched her hands, the same hands he had seen tremble slightly in the tunnel, now impossibly gentle as they wrapped the boy's ankle. He watched the way she smiled at the child, a small, genuine upturn of her lips that did not reach her tired eyes. He told himself he was just assessing a variable, a person who had been present at an attack on his family, but his focus was too sharp, too specific. Elsa Ree, the clinic coordinator, bustled over, her expression nervous. Mr. Valente, we are so grateful. Nero handed her the envelope, his attention still fixed across the room. See that it is used for supplies, not administrative costs, he said, his voice a low rumble that did not belong in this bright, hopeful space. Of course, thank you, Elsa whispered. Mira heard the voice. She did not recognize it, but its quiet authority made the hairs on her arms stand up. She finished with the boy, giving him a sticker, and as she stood, she heard the sound of expensive, hard-soled shoes turning on the linoleum. She heard the chime of the door. Her heart gave a single, hard kick against her ribs, a strange response to a sound. She dismissed it as fatigue and called the next patient. Outside, a cold drizzle had begun, slicking the pavement. As Nero reached his car, another vehicle slid to the curb. Vera Cade emerged, her red umbrella a slash of color in the gray day. She was the mind behind the Cade outfit, his sharpest, most unpredictable rival. She smiled, a thin, predatory expression. Well, Nero Valente, patron of the sciences. Her eyes flicked to the clinic's glowing lantern sign. Funding the little angel in scrubs. Are we trying to buy your way into heaven? Nero's expression did not change. He simply looked at her, the rain beating on the shoulders of his coat. He said nothing, but he catalogued the moment. Vera had seen him, and Vera had connected him, however mockingly, to the woman inside. The knowledge settled in his chest like a shard of ice. That evening, the city felt darker. Mira's shift was supposed to have ended hours ago, but she was covering a call at the Harbor Light, a smoky bar in the warehouse district. A man was on the floor, his face swelling, his breathing a desperate, high-pitched whistle, anaphylaxis. Mira was fast, plunging the EpiPen into his thigh, calling out vitals to her partner, establishing an airway. The bar's patrons watched, a silent, unnerved circle. When the man's breathing eased and the immediate crisis passed, she began the paperwork, her pen scratching across the clipboard under the dim bar light. "You need a better pen." A man stepped out of the shadows, offering a heavy, silver pen. He was dressed in a well-fitting suit, but unlike Nero's, it was modern, approachable. His smile was warm, and his eyes were clear, assessing her with open respect. "Elias Drake," he said, as she took the pen and signed the form. "I'm with the Urban Integrity Bureau. That was impressive work. You are incredibly calm under pressure." "Just the job," Mira said, handing the pen back. The weight of it felt solid, reliable. "I doubt that," Elias said. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if she were a person and not just a uniform. "Most people run from the fire. You run toward it. Let me buy you a coffee for saving that man's life. Or, if you are off duty, something stronger." He handed her a business card. Mira felt a rare, hesitant warmth. "I'm still on shift, but thank you, Mr. Drake." "Elias," he corrected gently, "maybe another time." From across the street, parked in the mouth of a dark alley, Nero Valente watched. He had been tailing his brother's transport when the call at the Harbor Light crackled over the scanner frequency he monitored. He told himself he was ensuring no Cade associates were near his territory. But he was watching her. He watched through the rain-streaked windshield as the man in the suit, Elias Drake, a name he knew too well. The UIB's clean-cut public face spoke to Mira, and he watched as Mira, who had been all ice and efficiency in the tunnel, gave the man a small, tired, genuine smile. A hot, unfamiliar current lanced through Nero's chest. It was a vile, possessive sting. Jealousy. It was an emotion he despised, an emotion for weaker men. It was a loss of control. He saw Drake hand her his card. He saw her take it. "Drive," he bid out to his driver. The SUV pulled silently away from the curb. Nero stared into the passing darkness, his reflection a mask in the glass. She is nothing in this game, he told himself. A civilian, a non-entity. He repeated the words in his mind, forcing them to take root. And he was disturbed to find that, for the first time in his life, he was finding it exceptionally difficult to believe his own commands. Elias Drake did not just visit the Lantern Clinic. He arrived like a solution. He walked in during a lull, his suit impeccable despite the damp, and introduced himself to Elsa Ree not as a UIB official, but as a private citizen chairing a new municipal grant. He was the new flagship sponsor for the late-night health program. "This is a game changer," Elias Elsa was saying, her hands clasped. "We've been trying to fund this for a year. This and the anonymous donation that came in just hours before yours. We can finally operate safely after midnight." Mira was restocking a supply cabinet, her back to the front desk, but she froze at the sound of his voice. "Elsa, this is fantastic," Elias said, his voice warm. "But the real reason I stopped by was to see if Mira Solis was working." He stepped past the desk, his gaze finding her instantly. He did not loom. He approached. "Mira, it's good to see you again. I hoped I would." He remembered her name. In her world, people were EMT, medic, or you. To be seen, to be named, felt like a foreign luxury. "Mr. Drake," she said, wiping her hands on her scrubs. "Elias, please. I was hoping we could talk for a moment about the city, about what you see out there." They stood near the window, the gray light of Greyhaven filtering in. He did not flirt. He listened. He asked her about the neighborhoods, about the gaps in the system. She found herself telling him about her mother, a seamstress who used to barter mending clothes for medicine. "People who do the real work," Elias said, his eyes filled with a sincere, polished respect. "They deserve a safe city to do it in. That's all I want." He smiled, a gesture that was both charming and carefully respectful of her boundaries. "Thank you for your time, Mira." He left, and the clinic felt a little brighter, a little more hopeful. Mira did not know that 2 checks for the exact same amount had funded the night program. One was signed by Elias Drake for the UIB. The other was a cashier's check, routed through 3 shell corporations, authorized by Nero Valente. 2 signatures, 2 worlds, both aimed squarely at her. Nero did not enter the clinic. He did not need to. His world was one of information, and the report on his desk was concise. Elias Drake had spent 11 minutes at the Lantern. He had smiled 4 times. He had called her Mira. Nero looked at the clock on his wall. 3:14 p.m. He imagined her in the clinic, perhaps smiling back. The muscle in his jaw tightened. He made a call. That evening, a nondescript plumbing van parked across the street from the Lantern. The next night, a dark sedan with tinted windows took up a post at the end of her street in Dock 9. They were ghosts, invisible protection. Nero Valente was guarding the one person in the city who did not know she was his. He did not go near her. He just watched the clock. And with every minute that ticked by, the steel bands of his control grew tighter, straining against an unfamiliar pressure. The rain came down in sheets a few nights later, turning the city into a smear of neon and black. The call was an overdose. A block from the clinic, a young man, barely 20, sprawled in an alley, his breathing shallow. "We need to move, now," Mira shouted to her partner, Jonas, over the deluge. They had him on the gurney, a portable backboard, and were trying to wheel him to the ambulance. The alley was slick with a foul mix of rainwater and garbage. The gurney's wheel hit a loose cobblestone and skidded. Jonas slipped, falling to one knee. The gurney tilted violently, the patient beginning to slide. "I do not have him," Jonas yelled. Mira threw her weight against the gurney, her gloves slipping on the wet metal rail. It was too heavy. It was going to tip. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the alley. In one fluid, powerful motion, a man was there. Nero? He did not speak. He simply lunged, catching the high side of the gurney with one hand. His grip was absolute. With his other hand, he grabbed the rail just beside Mira's, his bare fingers brushing the back of her gloved hand. The contact was like a static charge, a jolt of pure energy that flashed up Mira's arm. He leveled the gurney with an effortless, controlled strength, and then he looked at her. It was not the dismissive glance from the tunnel. It was not the veiled assessment from the clinic. He looked at her as if she were the only thing in the alley, the only thing in the world. His dark eyes were stripped of all pretense, all command. In the pulsing red light of the ambulance, she saw something raw, something that looked almost like a confession. His silence was deafening, a question he had no right to ask. Mira's breath caught, her heart hammered, a frantic bird against her ribs. She was the first to look away, breaking the charge. "Thank you," she said, her voice strained. "Professional." She and Jonas pushed the gurney the last few feet, loading it into the ambulance. Nero did not follow. He just stood in the rain, a dark, motionless sentinel. As Mira was about to climb in, a car pulled up. Elias Drake got out, holding an umbrella, his expression concerned. "I heard the call on the scanner. I was nearby. Is everyone all right?" He stopped, his gaze shifting from Mira to the man standing in the alley. Elias saw Nero Valente, soaked to the skin, standing entirely too close to Mira Solis. The two men locked eyes over the short distance. Elias's look was all armored politeness, a questioning, civic authority. Nero's was flat, unmoving, and utterly possessive. Mira, oblivious to the silent declaration of war happening in front of her, wiped the rain from her face. "We are fine. Just a slip." She looked at both of them. Two powerful men standing in a downpour for reasons she could not fathom. "We have warm water in the ambulance. If either of you—" "No," Nero said. His voice was gravel. "I am fine. Thank you, Mira," Elias said, his smile tight. He turned it back to her, deliberately shutting Nero out. "I heard a joke at the precinct today. You will appreciate this. Why do EMTs cut the pants off patients?" Mira, exhausted and running on adrenaline, played along. "I do not know. Why?" "Because scissors are faster than asking for their insurance card." It was a stupid inside baseball joke. Mira let out a short, tired laugh. The sound hit Nero like a physical blow. He watched her laugh for another man, a man who represented everything he was not public. Clean, safe. His eyes darkened until they were black pools in the flashing light. He turned without a word and disappeared into the night. Later, as Mira finally stripped off her damp uniform in her small Doc 9 room, her phone buzzed, a single text from an unknown number. "Doc 9 isn't safe tonight." She frowned, a prickle of unease running down her spine. She looked out her window at the dark, quiet street. Probably a prank from Jonas, or a misdial. She was too tired for mysteries. She deleted the message and fell into bed. Miles away, in a car overlooking the river, Nero Valente slowly uncurled his fist. His knuckles were white. He had sent the text. It was a test, a warning, a first, clumsy attempt to insert himself into her world, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, it would not be the last. The district-wide blackout hit Doc 9 like a hammer. One moment, Mira was walking down the hallway of Celadon Tower after a late-call check on an elderly resident. The next, the world vanished into absolute, suffocating darkness. The emergency lights failed to kick in. She fumbled for the freight elevator, her muscle memory guiding her, and stepped inside just as the generators for the rest of the block sputtered and failed. The elevator car did not move. It was an old, rattling metal box, and the silence that fell was heavier than the dark. She was trapped. She pressed the emergency button, but the bell was dead. The air grew close, smelling of grease and old metal. She took a steadying breath, fighting the primal urge to panic, her EMT training kicking in, assess the scene. She was secure. She was not injured. She just had to wait. Time stretched, marked only by the frantic beat of her own heart, then a new sound, a metallic groaning, not from the elevator's machinery, but from the outside, the grinding scrape of metal on metal. The doors shuddered, then slowly, agonizingly began to part, a gap of blackness, and then a brilliant, silver beam of light sliced through the dark, blinding her. It pinned her against the back wall, making her throw up a hand. "Are you all right?" The voice was Nero's. It was not a question. It was a demand for a fact. He stood in the gap, a silhouette against the hallway's darkness, holding a heavy flashlight. He had forced the doors with a pry bar that now lay at his feet. "I'm fine," Mira said, her voice sounding small in the confined space. "Just stuck." He reached a hand in, not to help her, but to guide her. "Come out. The building is not stable in this outage." She stepped out, and the beam of the flashlight followed her, tracing the line of her cheek, illuminating the weariness in her eyes. She was shivering, the damp cold of the unheated building seeping into her bones. He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the harsh light. Then, in a single fluid motion, he shrugged out of his dark, heavy wool coat. The gesture was slow, deliberate, utterly controlled. He did not ask. He simply stepped forward, the space between them shrinking, and draped it over her shoulders. The coat was incredibly heavy, weighted with his presence. It was still warm from his body and smelled of expensive wool, cold night air, and something distinctly him. The lining was silk. It swallowed her, the sleeves hanging far past her hands. "The utility room is this way," he said, placing a hand on the small of her back, a formal, guiding pressure that burned through her thin scrubs. "We can wait for the engineers there." The room was on the roof, accessed by a set of concrete stairs. The only sound was the drumming of a relentless rain on the flat roof above them, a rhythm that vibrated through the small space. Nero kept the flashlight aimed at the floor, filling the room with a dim, reflected glow. Mira wrapped the coat tighter around herself, her shivering intensifying. It was the cold, she told herself, but it was also him. He stood just a few feet away, a hand's breadth, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from him. He was a furnace of controlled energy. He did not speak, just watched her. His eyes, dark in the low light, were fixed on her mouth. He seemed to be in a battle with himself, his stillness so absolute it was a form of violence. To break the tension, she spoke. "You should not be in this building during an outage. It's a security risk." His lips tilted in a smile that held no humor. "And you should not be in an elevator." He paused. "My mother hated elevators. She said they were boxes for ghosts." The personal detail was so unexpected it startled her. My mother hated needles. She was a seamstress. She said anything that could pierce cloth could pierce skin, and she wanted no part of it. "Yet you spend your nights with them," he said. "And you spend yours in high-rises, despite your mother," she countered softly. A silence fell, but this one was different. It was not empty. It was filled with the rain, with the shared warmth of his coat, with the things they had just admitted. Mira found herself smiling, a small, tired gesture. "She would have liked you. You're decisive." "She would have admired you," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "You are not afraid." "I'm always afraid," she confessed, her eyelids suddenly heavy. "I just move faster than the fear." He tilted his head, a fractional movement. The beam of the flashlight was still on the floor, but his face was close enough for her to see. He was watching her, and the raw, unguarded look from the alley was back. He was asking permission. He was waiting for her to pull away, to break the spell. She did not move. She did not breathe. The kiss came like a whisper. It was not the rough, demanding assault she would have expected from a man like him. It was a careful, almost reverent pressure. His lips were warm, firm, and tasted faintly of the cold rain. He advanced slowly, giving her every chance to retreat. Her hands, lost in the sleeves of his coat, came up and gripped the heavy lapels, holding on as if the ground were shifting beneath her. Her shoulder brushed his chest. She could feel the solid muscle through his shirt. Their breaths mingled, a warm cloud in the cold room. It deepened, a slow exploration, a question and an answer, a profound, silent conversation that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with a desperate, shared loneliness. He was the one who pulled back. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He rested his forehead against hers for a single second. His eyes closed. When he opened them, they were filled with a dark, painful apology. Not for the kiss, but for how much more he had wanted it to be. As if summoned by the break, the power snapped back on. The generators roared to life, and the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed, flooding the small room with a harsh, sterile white light. The reality of the moment crashed down on them. He was Nero Valente. She was an EMT. He was the shadow, and she was, impossibly, standing in his arms. He stepped back, the loss of his warmth immediate. Mira's hand, emerging from the long sleeve, reached out. She did not grab him. She just placed her fingers lightly on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel the heavy, steady beat. "I'm okay," she whispered. It meant more than just the elevator. He covered her hand with his own for a split second, a gesture of thanks, before letting go. He opened the door to the hallway. The lights were on. The illusion shattered. As they stepped out, a figure stood at the far end of the corridor, near the main elevators. Elias Drake. He was in his suit, his hair damp from the rain. He had clearly been searching for her. His gaze went from Mira's face to the massive, dark coat dwarfing her frame, and then to Nero, who stood beside her in just his shirt sleeves. Elias's political smile clicked into place, but it did not reach his eyes. "Mira, I'm glad you're all right." Wait, he looked at Nero, his tone all professional courtesy. "Mr. Valente, good to see you're hands-on with your properties." Then back to Mira, his voice laced with a sharp, proprietary edge. "Everything running smoothly?" Nero did not answer. He gave Mira one last look, a look that said more than the kiss ever could. Then he turned and walked away down the corridor, his footsteps silent on the carpet. As Mira watched him go, she felt the loss of him like a physical ache, and Nero, as he walked into the darkness of the stairwell, felt something deep inside him, something he had thought was frozen solid, crack open from end to end. The game of shadows shifted to a game of chess, the Urban Integrity Bureau, with Elias Drake as its charismatic face, launched Operation Clean Sweep Greyhaven. It was a media blitz, all polished press conferences and promises of a safer city. Elias, now a frequent visitor to the Lantern Clinic, approached Mira not with a request, but with an opportunity. "Mira, you are the most trusted face in these communities," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. He leaned against a filing cabinet, a picture of approachable authority. "They do not trust a suit like me, but they trust you. I want you to be a community ambassador for the UIB, a bridge. Help me help them." He was offering her a voice, a platform. But before she could even consider it, the first move was played against her. A leak, starting on a fringe political blog and spreading like wildfire to the major news outlets, Valente Syndicate's anonymous donation funds East Gables Clinic. The story was toxic. It conflated Nero's blood money with the clinic's hard-won trust. Mira's world tilted. Patients who used to greet her with smiles now looked at her with suspicion. Online, the comments were brutal. They found a picture of her from the tunnel, soot-streaked and exhausted, and juxtaposed it with a file photo of Nero. The nickname was cruel, and it stuck. The Mafia's Angel. In his penthouse office overlooking the dark river, Nero shattered a glass against the wall. He saw the article on his monitor, saw her face, saw the filthy nickname. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the number of a newspaper editor he owned. He would destroy them. "You touch her, she burns." Vince, his advisor, stood in the doorway. He was the only man who could speak to Nero this way. "Think. You make one call. You confirm the story. You threaten that blogger. You prove you have something to hide. Right now, she's an inconvenient story. You get involved. You make her a target. Your target." Nero's hand clenched the phone so tightly the case creaked. The logic was cold, perfect, and unbearable. Who could move mountains of concrete and cash, who could erase men from the city registry, could not lift a finger to protect her. To protect her. He had to swallow the poison and do nothing. It was the most violent act of self-control he had ever committed. The city, however, does not wait. Vera Cade, sensing the shift in the game, made her own move. She held a press conference, not in some stuffy office, but in the heart of Dock 9, on the street corner nearest Mira's apartment. Trucks bearing the Cade outfit logo were handing out emergency aid kits and grocery vouchers. Vera, chic in a tailored coat, stood before the cameras. While some people, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, hide their money in so-called anonymous donations. We are here, on the ground. We believe in direct action, not in buying the silence of—" She paused, as if searching for the term. "Local angels." She smiled, then gestured behind her. A massive poster had been unfurled, a candid shot from inside the lantern clinic. It was Mira, her back to a supply shelf, laughing at something. Standing next to her, smiling warmly, was Elias Drake. "We support true public servants," Vera said, "like Mr. Drake of the UIB, and the hard-working people he inspires. Greyhaven deserves charity, not a charitable love that comes with strings." The report played on the large screen in Nero's office. He had weathered the Mafia's angel story. He had held himself in check. But the sight of that photograph, Mira, smiling, with Elias, all of it manipulated by Vera, shattered his discipline. This was not just an attack, it was a humiliation. It was Vera, using Elias to twist the one pure thing he had encountered. The jealousy that had been a cold sting in the alley was now a white-hot, possessive rage. He had been invisible. Now, he would be unmissable. Mira was leaving the clinic, head down, trying to ignore the single persistent reporter asking her for a comment, when the black SUV pulled up to the curb. It did not just stop, it arrived, planting itself like a flag. The back door opened. Nero Valente stepped out, in the middle of the afternoon. The reporter's jaw dropped. He fumbled for his camera. Nero ignored him. He ignored the whispers from the street. He walked directly to Mira, stopping just in front of her, his body a solid shield. He looked down at her, his eyes searching her face, cataloging the exhaustion and the new lines of strain around her mouth. Then he turned, a predator assessing his territory, and faced the stunned reporter. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply stated a fact, his voice a low, cold instrument of command. "She saved my life, through my brother. She is not part of your story." He put his hand on the small of her back, the same formal, possessive gesture from the blackout, and guided her to the SUV. "Get in." It was not a request. But Mira stopped. She looked at his hand, then at his face. "No, this is my work. Nero, you cannot do this." He stared at her, a silent, furious battle raging in his eyes. He had just claimed her in front of the world, and she was defying him. But the reporter's camera was flashing, and he saw the checkmate. He slowly, agonizingly lowered his hand. "As you wish," he said. The words clipped. He got back in the SUV and was gone. The clip was on every channel within an hour. Elias Drake watched it in his office, his hand tightening on the strap of his leather briefcase until his knuckles turned white. His entire strategy was built on being the safe, clean alternative. He was the light. Nero was the dark. Now. Nero had just walked into the daylight, muddying all the lines, claiming the one person Elias had earmarked as his own symbol of integrity. He found Mira at her apartment that night. He was the picture of concern. "Mira, what he did today was unacceptable. He put a target on your back. He's using you as a pawn, the same way Vera is." He stepped closer, his tone dropping to one of intimacy, of shared purpose. "Do not let them define you. The UIB Benefactors Gala is tomorrow night. Come with me. Not as a date," he added quickly, "but as my guest of honor. Stand on that stage with me. Tell your story, in your own words. Show this city who you really are, not who they say you are." Mira was tired of being a symbol. She was angry at Nero for his presumption and wary of Elias's polish. "I will go," she said, "but not with you. I will go on my own." Nero called her minutes after Elias left. His voice was tight, restrained. "You are walking into the lion's den. He will use you." "And you are not today," she shot back. A beat of silence. "Let me send a car. My men. They will be invisible." "No, Nero," she said, her voice firm, closing the door on the argument. "I am not your territory." He did not argue, and he simply hung up. His nod, alone in his penthouse, was slow, like a glacier moving. His eyes were dark, starless. The gala was a different world, a sea of black ties and glittering dresses in a ballroom overlooking the city. Mira felt alien in a simple, borrowed dark blue dress, her EMT-issued boots swapped for uncomfortable heels. Elias found her instantly, a perfect host, guiding her through the crowd, his hand resting proprietarily on her back. "See," he whispered, his smile brilliant for the cameras. "This is where the real change happens. Mira, not in the gutter." He was pulled away by a politician. Mira stood alone for a moment, a small island of reality in an ocean of performance. A waiter brushed past her, a subtle, practiced move. "Ma'am." Something cold and small was pressed into her palm. Her fingers closed around it automatically. She looked down, opening her hand just enough to see a black anonymous USB drive. A whisper, so low she almost missed it, from a man already disappearing into the crowd. "If you want to know who really owns the violence in Greyhaven, watch." The click of her apartment door locking was the loudest sound Mira had ever heard. The gala dress felt abrasive against her skin, a costume from a world she had only just learned was a stage. She tore it off, throwing it in a heap, and pulled on her worn EMT uniform pants and a soft t-shirt. Comfort, control. She sat at her small table, the laptop humming, and plugged in the USB. The screen filled instantly. It was not a jumble of stolen data, it was a meticulously organized archive. Folders labeled Toru, UIB, and CADE. She clicked, and the floor dropped out from beneath her. Internal memos from the Tri-State Organized Response Unit, side by side with UIB strategic plans. They were working together. It was a complex, suffocating net, woven from jurisdictional loopholes and political ambition. Elias Drake was not fighting a war on crime, he was directing one. The documents laid it bare the UIB and Toru were actively feeding Vera Cade information, resources, and, most chillingly, deconflicted strike zones, allowing her to hit Valente assets without fear of police intervention. The goal was simple: escalate the violence, let the city bleed just enough. Then, Elias, the public's white knight, would ride in, armed with emergency powers, to crush both syndicates, a victory that would make him the most powerful political figure in the state. Mira felt a cold sickness rise in her throat. Every donation, every late-night health program, it was all about optics. Then she saw the video file, labeled only PKG Meet 04. The view was from a security camera in a sterile, concrete parking garage. The timestamp was from just 2 weeks prior. Elias Drake, looking casual in a quarter-zip sweater, leaned against a pillar. Vera Cade stood opposite, looking bored. The audio was sharp. "The Valente donation was a gift," Vera said, her voice dry. "Your leak played perfectly." "It had to," Elias replied, his tone the same reasonable, earnest one he used at the clinic. "Nero is all ID. He will always overreact to protect his territory. We just had to give him territory he cared about." "And the girl?" Vera asked. "And the EMT, she is the key," Elias said, and he smiled. It was his charming public smile. "She is the door to public opinion. She is our moral center, our angel. When this breaks, and Valente looks like a possessive monster for dragging her into it, I will be the one to publicly rescue her. The city will demand I be given the power to stop him." Mira's hand flew to her mouth. Stifling a gasp, the air in her apartment was thin, unbreathable. She was not a person to him. She was not even a pawn. She was a prop. A cold, physical chill washed over her, a wave of such profound violation that she had to grip the table to steady herself. Her fingers moved, typing a text to a number she had only just memorized. Old Glass Warehouse, Pier 12. 1 hour, come alone. He was already there, standing in the cavernous, dark space. The warehouse was a skeleton, its broken windows looking out over the black, churning river. The only light came from the distant, indifferent glow of the city. Mira walked toward him, the sound of her footsteps on the debris-strewn floor echoing in the silence. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice low. "Neither should you." She stopped 10 feet from him and held out the small, black USB. "You need to see this." He did not move for a moment, then he crossed the space, took the drive from her outstretched hand and plugged it into a slim, hardened laptop he produced from inside his coat. He stood and watched, his back to the river, his face illuminated by the screen's cold light. Mira watched him. She saw no flicker of emotion, just a stillness that was more terrifying than any rage. He read the memos. He saw the maps of the deconflicted zones. Then he played the video. He watched Elias Drake and Vera Cade plot the city's future. He watched Elias name her, call her the key. When the video ended, Nero closed the laptop. He did not speak. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The only sign of the cataclysm inside him was the thick, dark vein on his wrist, pulsing, visible in the dim light. The jealousy, the betrayal, it was all there. But it was not the simple, hot jealousy of the alley. This was a cold, systemic rage. It was the fury of a man realizing he had been outmaneuvered and that the enemy had used the one thing he was trying, clumsily, to protect. "I will dismantle him," Nero said. The words were quiet, precise, and absolute. "Not just his career. I will take him apart." "No." He turned his head slowly. His eyes were black, flat, devoid of any light. "He put a target on you. He named you." "And you will not," Mira said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. She stepped into the space between them. "That is the trap. Nero, that is what they are waiting for you to be the monster, for you to start a war over me. I will not be your excuse." "He used you, Mira." The words were ripped from him, a low, guttural sound. "Then do not do the same." She looked him dead in the eye, her own fear transforming into a different kind of strength. "This is the line. If you touch Elias, if you go after Vera, if you hurt anyone because of me, I will leave Greyhaven. I will get on a bus and disappear. You will never see me again. I mean it." She saw the impact of her words. It was a physical blow. A flicker of raw, undisguised pain crossed his features. She had just taken his revenge from him, using the only leverage she had herself. He stared at her, the battle warring inside him so visibly she could almost hear it. The river, the city, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he gave a single, slow, agonizing nod. "I will not." The tension snapped. Mira's knees buckled, the strength that had held her up vanishing. He caught her, his hands gripping her shoulders, steadying her. It was not a romantic gesture. It was an anchor. She sagged against him, her forehead resting on the solid wall of his chest. She breathed in the smell of him wool, cold air, safety. He lowered his head, his own control frayed, and rested his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air. Two survivors in the wreckage. His hands moved from her shoulders to her back, holding her, shielding her. "I will keep you safe," he murmured into her hair. She pulled back just enough to look up, her face inches from his. The river lights were caught in his eyes, and for the first time, she saw them not as cold steel, but as a deep, softened dark. "We keep each other safe," she whispered. He held her for 1 second longer, a beat of stolen time, before letting her go. She walked out of the warehouse alone, her spine straight. She had drawn her line. She was halfway down the block when a black sedan with no license plates eased around the corner. It stopped, idling just ahead of her. Her pocket vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "Come to Halcyon Span alone if you want Jonas to live." Jonas, her partner. Kind, funny Jonas, who always brought her coffee. A cold dread, sharper than the one Elias had inspired, seized her. This was Vera. This was a different game. Her first, desperate instinct was to run back to the warehouse, to Nero, but her own words stopped her. "If you touch anyone because of me..." This was the test. If she told him, he would tear the city apart to save Jonas, and he would do it for her. He would break his promise. She would be the reason. She could not be. Standing on the dark, empty street, Mira made her choice. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Elsa at the clinic. Code 1099, active, Jonas. It was their internal, off-the-books duress code, signaling a staff emergency. Then, ignoring the black sedan, she ran, not to her car. She ran toward the EMT substation, toward the old, decommissioned ambulance she knew was parked out back. The halcyon span bridge was a thin ribbon of concrete suspended over the dark, rushing river. The wind was a physical force, screaming through the high-tension cables, trying to peel Mira from the earth. She had parked the old ambulance 100 yards back and walked, her boots heavy on the grating. Vera Cade was waiting by the center pylon, illuminated by the harsh, yellow glare of temporary construction lights. She was flanked by 2 gunmen, their forms solid and unmoving against the wind, in the illuminated cabin of a construction crane. Mira could see Jonas. He was slumped, his hands bound. "The angel arrives," Vera called out, her voice thin but sharp in the wind. She smiled, a gesture that held no warmth. "I am impressed. You came alone." "Let him go," Mira said, her hands visible, open at her sides. "Oh, we will. We are all going to go our separate ways." Vera took a step forward, the wind whipping her coat. "Here is the deal. You give me the USB drive and you come with me. You are my insurance policy, my exit visa from this city." "What are you talking about?" Mira stalled, her eyes fixed on the crane cabin. Vera laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Do not play naive. It does not suit you. You are Elias Drake's best PR stunt, the Mafia's angel he was going to rescue on the 6 o'clock news. You are my leverage, sweetheart, him and you, for a clean flight out of Greyhaven." The accusation hit Mira, but the sight of Jonas made it irrelevant. "I do not have the drive." "Then you are just..." "She's not with you." Nero's voice. It did not boom, it cut. He emerged from the darkness at the opposite end of the span, walking not with the silent tread of an assassin, but with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man who owned the ground he walked on. He was alone. Mira's heart stopped. "Nero, no, you promised." His eyes found hers, and the raw, possessive fury in them was terrifying. It was the jealousy from the alley, magnified by the fear from the warehouse. It was the look of a man whose every ironclad rule had just been shattered. He was not here despite his promise. He was here because of it. "I track all emergency band radios. Mira," he said, his gaze never leaving her. "I heard your code. You were never going to be alone." Vera's eyes widened, then narrowed in calculation. "Well, this changes the math." As if summoned, a new sound, a motorcade, a line of black UIB vehicles, sirens off, lights flashing, screeched to a halt, blocking the bridge entrance behind Nero. Elias Drake stepped out, his suit perfect, his face a mask of civic duty. He was flanked by a team of UIB officers in tactical gear, weapons raised. "Vera Cade, you are under arrest, Mr. Valente. I will ask you to step away from the hostage." A UIB cameraman was right behind him, his red light on, capturing the scene for the live feed. The ambition in Elias's eyes was naked. He was here to capture both of them. Vera saw the trap. She saw Elias, she saw Nero, and she saw the cameras. She was being erased. She panicked. She raised her pistol, not at Nero, but at the UIB line, and fired a single wild warning shot. The world exploded. The UIB team, trained and jumpy, returned fire, the air filled with the sharp, flat cracks of gunfire. Nero moved, roaring Mira's name, tackling her down behind a concrete barrier. Mira's training slammed into place. She was not a victim. She was a medic. "Jonas!" she screamed. She scrambled out from under Nero's protective weight, ignoring his shout, and sprinted low and fast toward the crane. Bullets sparked off the metal, ricocheting with high-pitched whines. She reached the cabin, tore the door open, and used her trauma shears to cut Jonas's bonds. He was dazed. A cut on his forehead. "Go the ambulance, run." She shoved him out, pushing him toward the only safe place on the bridge. He stumbled, then ran. But as Mira turned to follow, she saw it, huddled behind a stack of rebar, a small shape, a child, no older than 5, in a thin jacket, a worker's daughter, caught in the crossfire, weeping silently in terror. "No," Mira whispered. She looked at the ambulance, then at the child. There was no choice. She ran back into the open. "Hold your fire!" she screamed, a useless plea. She reached the girl, scooped her into her arms, and turned, shielding the small body with her own. A bullet grazed her arm, a hot, searing line of pain. She did not falter. Nero met her halfway. He had run from the barrier, his face a mask of pale fury, firing 2 precise shots at Vera's gunmen, forcing them to take cover. He grabbed Mira and the child, almost throwing them the last few feet into the back of the old ambulance. He dove in after them, slamming the door. The sound of the firefight was suddenly muffled, replaced by the small, terrified sobs of the child and Mira's own ragged breathing. Nero was bleeding. A bullet had torn through the sleeve of his jacket, leaving a long, bloody graze along his forearm. He ignored it. He was looking at Mira, at the blood on her arm, at the child she was holding. He looked at her as if she were the only source of air in the sealed vehicle. The sirens were louder now, mixing with the rain, which had begun to fall in cold, hard sheets. The adrenaline was a high-pitched scream in Mira's ears. She grabbed the child, checking her for injuries, settling her on the gurney with Jonas. Then she turned to Nero. Her hands, shaking, went to his face. She grabbed his jaw, forcing him to look at her, her thumbs pressing into the hard line of his cheek. "You are here," she breathed. His hands came up, spanning her waist, his fingers digging into her back as he hauled her against him. His forehead crashed against hers. His breath was hot, ragged. It was not a plea. It was a fact. "I am here." He kissed her. It was not the slow, questioning kiss from the tower. It was a collision. It was fast and deep and desperate. It was the taste of rain, adrenaline, and possession. It was a brand, a promise, and an absolution, all in one. It was over as fast as it began. He pulled back, his eyes still locked on hers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own encrypted phone. He handed her the small, black USB drive. "This is yours, the original. Do not lose it." Then he turned to the ambulance's control panel. His bleeding arm moved with precision. He plugged his phone into the auxiliary jack and flipped a switch, the one labeled External PA. He hit play. Elias Drake's voice, calm and reasonable, suddenly boomed across the entire halcyon span, amplified by the ambulance's loudspeakers, drowning out the gunfire. "And the EMT, she is the key. She is our moral center, our angel." And then Vera's voice. Valente is all ID. He will always overreact." Outside the ambulance, the UIB team froze, their weapons lowered, their heads turning in confusion toward their leader. The shooting stopped. The only sound was the wind, the rain, and the damming. Clear voices of Elias and Vera echoing over the river. The recording from the ambulance loudspeaker echoed into the sudden, shocked silence. On the bridge, the UIB tactical team stood frozen, their weapons half lowered, their gazes shifting from their commander, Elias, to the source of the sound. The live stream from Elias's own cameraman, paired with the construction site's automated security feed, was broadcasting the audio unfiltered across the web. The public, the press, the entire city was hearing the unvarnished truth in real time. Elias Drake's face went white. The polished mask of civic duty cracked, revealing the raw panic beneath. "It is a fake," he shouted, his voice too high, too sharp. "That is a deep fake Valente's audio manipulation. He is setting me up." But the lie crumbled as it left his lips. The voice was undeniably his, the same earnest, convincing tone that had charmed a city, the metadata on the file, which Nero had made sure was visible on his phone's screen and now broadcast, was time-stamped. It was dated before the gala, before the Mafia's angel story had even peaked. His own voice, his own words, had convicted him in the courtroom of public opinion. Vera Cade understood the trap first. She was finished. Elias was finished. The cameras were rolling, and she was surrounded by UIB agents who now looked at their boss with dawning horror. She saw Mira, standing near the ambulance door, the source of it all, the witness. "You!" Vera snarled, and her arm came up. Her pistol aimed not at Nero, not at Elias, but at Mira. There was no time for a warning. There was no thought. There was only the animal instinct that had lived in Nero's chest since the tunnel. He moved, launching himself forward, his body a shield, covering Mira just as the gun fired. The impact was a brutal shove, sending them both smashing against the side of the ambulance. Nero grunted, a sharp exhalation of pain. Mira did not scream. Her training kicked in, a cold, blessed numbness. She was on her feet, pushing him back. "Nero, where?" He looked at her, his face pale, his teeth gritted. His left shoulder was a mass of dark, wet cloth. "I am fine," he ground out. "You are not." Her hands were already in the ambulance's open jump bag. She pulled out a stack of 4x4 gauze pads and a compression bandage. She ripped open his jacket, shoving the fabric aside, and pressed the gauze directly onto the wound. It was a through and through, bleeding heavily but not pulsing. He hissed, his hand grabbing her wrist, his grip like steel. "Look at me," she commanded. Her voice, the calm, authoritative tone she used on dying patients. She pressed harder. "Look at me." His eyes, dark with pain and adrenaline, locked on hers. The fury, the jealousy, the terror, it was all there, burning. "Do not leave me," she whispered. It was not a plea. It was a fact. She was not losing him. The wail of new sirens cut through the air, different from the UIB's European yelp. These were the heavy, low-frequency sirens of the city's Civilian Oversight Bureau. Their black and white vehicles flooded the bridge, cutting off all exits. Men in dark blue uniforms, marked CSOB, stepped out. They were not a tactical team. They were investigators. A man in a trench coat, his face weary and unimpressed, walked directly to Elias. "Director Drake, you are relieved of command. This is now a CSOB scene." Simultaneously, a quiet, efficient team of plainclothes officers' internal affairs moved past them, their target singular. They surrounded Vera Cade, who stood defeated, her gun empty at her side. "Miss Cade, you are in custody." The bridge was now a constellation of flashing lights, blue, red, and the harsh white of news cameras. The press had arrived, and their lenses were focused on the three centers of the drama. Elias C., pale and silent as he was questioned, Vera being led away in cuffs, and Nero Valenti bleeding, with the Mafia's angel holding him together. Nero was still on his feet. He looked at the chaos, the swarm of new officials, the blinking red lights of the cameras. He was armed. He was a criminal. He was, in this moment, the most wanted man in the city. He made his choice. Slowly, deliberately, he reached inside his ruined jacket with his good hand. He pulled out his heavy, dark pistol. The CSOB officers tensed, raising their weapons. Nero did not look at them. He looked only at Mira, and he let the gun fall from his fingers. It hit the wet pavement with a heavy, final clatter, a public surrender. He turned to her, his back to the cameras, his body shielding her from the world's gaze. The pain was making him weave, but his voice was clear. "I choose you," he said, the words raw. "I choose you over power." The declaration, spoken just for her, was caught by a dozen boom mics. The speculation was over. Mira's eyes, which had been dry and focused, filled with tears. She grabbed his good hand, lacing her bloody fingers with his. She slid her shoulder under his injured one, taking his full weight. "I know," she whispered. "Now let's go." Together they moved, a single two-person phalanx. They walked away from the firefight, away from Elias, through the storm of flashing lights. No one stopped them. They were no longer two sides of a war. They were just survivors. A CTOB paramedic met them, guiding Nero to a gurney waiting by a fresh ambulance. "Sir, you need to sit down." Nero sat heavily on the edge, his gaze never leaving Mira's. The paramedic started to cut away his shirt. Before they loaded him, Mira stepped in, cupping his face with her blood-stained hand. He leaned his head down, his forehead pressing against hers, their noses brushed. Rain and sweat and blood were between them. He closed his eyes, a shudder of pain and relief running through him. She kissed him. It was short, gentle, and warm. A quiet press of lips, a promise sealed in the middle of a war zone. It was not for the cameras. It was for them. 1 week later, Greyhaven was a city holding its breath. The halcyon span incident had ripped the veil from its power structures. Elias Drake was suspended, buried under a mountain of internal UIB investigations. Toru, the Tri-State Organized Response Unit, had publicly disavowed any knowledge of his actions, cutting him loose with surgical precision. The city was a mess of political infighting and jurisdictional squabbles. But through the noise, one clear narrative had emerged. Mira Solis, the media had dropped the Mafia's Angel moniker. Now, she was just Mira, the medic who had run toward the gunfire to save a child and then refused to be a pawn in anyone's game. The Lantern Clinic remained open. It was an eye in the storm. In the chaotic days that followed the bridge, Mira worked. She set the broken arm of a dock worker who had gotten caught in a protest between Valente loyalists and a rival faction. She stitched a cut on the head of one of Nero's own men, who had come in quietly, his eyes wary, until she treated him with the same detached professionalism as any other patient. She placed life before the colors of their flags, and in doing so, created the only truly neutral ground in the city. Nero, for his part, did not hide. While his lawyers negotiated his surrender and testimony, he made a move that shocked the underworld. He called a meeting of his lieutenants, not in a dark boardroom, but in a public filing. He announced the dissolution of the Valente Syndicate. In its place, 2 new entities would be formed: the Valente Trust, a legal fund dedicated to developing Greyhaven's blighted neighborhoods, and Arcadia Holdings, a legitimate logistics and shipping company that would manage the docks. Subject to full audits, the violent wing was, with the stroke of a pen, disavowed. His old guard was apoplectic. Several advisors, men who had served his father, walked out. "You are castrating us," one grizzled captain snarled, his face red. "You've gone soft. All for a girl." Nero, his left arm in a black, clinical sling, his shoulder still healing, looked at the man. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. His gaze was cold, clear, and heavier than any threat. "I am stronger," he said, the words cutting through the cigar smoke, "because for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I am not willing to lose. You see that as weakness. That is why you will fail. Get out." The city was loud, but that night, Mira's small apartment in Dock 9 was quiet. The only sound was the bubble of boiling water and the steady, soft rain against the glass. Nero sat at her tiny kitchen table, watching her. He was out of place in the small, worn room, a dark, powerful shape against her peeling wallpaper. He had shed his suit jacket, wearing just a dark Henley that stretched across his shoulders. His injured arm was propped carefully on the table. Mira moved around him, her bare feet silent on the linoleum. She dumped a box of pasta into the pot, then turned to him, a wooden spoon in her hand. "You are favoring it too much." "It is fine," he said. "You are lying." She walked over and poked a finger at his good shoulder. "You are tensing your right side to compensate, which means your sutures are pulling. You are in pain, and you are hiding it." He looked up at her, caught, the city's most feared man, being scolded by an EMT in a worn T-shirt. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was the first time she had seen it, a genuine, unguarded expression that changed his entire face, softening the harsh lines. "Perhaps," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. The sight of that rare smile did something to her. It disarmed her more than any show of force. The tension of the last week, the fear, the cameras, the weight of his world and hers, it all receded, leaving just this small, warm kitchen. After they ate, standing over the counter, they did not talk about Elias or Vera or the hearings. They talked about the rain. They talked about the taste of the cheap pasta. She took his plate, and when she turned back from the sink, he was standing there, blocking her way. The yellow light from the single bulb over the sink cast long shadows, making the room feel intimate, protected. "You should not be here," she whispered. "If the press sees you—" "I do not care about the press." His good hand came up, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, a touch so light it was barely there. "I care about this." He leaned in. The kiss was not the desperate collision on the bridge, nor the questioning exploration in the tower. This was slow and deep and sure. It was a kiss of profound relief, a statement of fact. His lips were warm, and she tasted the salt and weariness of the day on him. Her hands found his waist, her fingers gripping the soft fabric of his shirt. She leaned into him, her body pressing against his, feeling the solid, living warmth of his chest. His uninjured arm came around her, his large hand spreading flat against her back, a gesture of pure, reassuring possession. He held her as if she were an anchor, and he had been adrift for a very long time. He moved his mouth from hers, his lips brushing her cheek, his breath warm against her ear. She turned her head, burying her face in the curve of his neck, breathing him in. She could feel his heart, a strong, steady beat beneath her own, and the tension of the last week finally, completely, broke. "Stay," she whispered against his skin. It was not a question, it was a plea. He just held her tighter, his hand moving in a slow, calming circle on her back. They stood like that for minutes, just breathing. The rain outside picked up, lashing against the window, a frantic counterpoint to the peace inside. That sound, the intrusion of the outside world, was what made them stop. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His forehead rested against hers. Their chests rose and fell in unison. The air between them was thick with shared warmth, with the unspoken, undeniable truth of what they had become. This was not the heat of a blind, reckless jealousy. This was the steady, burning warmth of respect, of two survivors who had seen the worst in each other's worlds and chosen to stand there anyway. Her phone buzzed on the counter, the sound abrasive. Mira did not want to look. She sighed, her breath fogging the small space between their faces. He did not move, just watched her. She picked it up. A text from a number she did not recognize, but the message was clear. "Public hearing, Halcyon incident, Asterion Hall, tomorrow, 10 a.m. You have been subpoenaed." Her stomach twisted. Elias, the UIB, the city. It was not over. Nero read her expression. "You do not have to go. My lawyers can—" "No." She put the phone down, her resolve hardening. She looked at him, her gaze clear. "I'm tired of being a symbol. I'm tired of being a pawn." She picked up her worn EMT jacket from the back of a chair, the one he had worn, the one she had used as a makeshift blanket for the child on the bridge. She put it on, zipping it up. It was her armor. "I will go," she said, "and you are coming with me, not in front of me to protect me, and not behind me in the shadows. You will walk in beside me." Asterion Hall was not a courtroom. It was a theater, and it was staging the trial of Greyhaven's soul. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the walls, their red lights like a dozen malevolent eyes. Mira and Nero walked down the center aisle, side by side, as promised. He was in a dark suit, his left arm bound in a sleek black sling. She was in her blue EMT uniform, her jacket zipped to the collar. They were a study in contrasts, a visual representation of the city's two halves, and they did not break step. The special prosecutor, a sharp woman brought in from outside, stood as they reached the front. Her voice was amplified, carrying to every corner of the packed room. Mr. Valente, the city is prepared to offer a conditional path to immunity, full, verifiable cooperation in dismantling the remaining violent factions, in exchange for your complete and public testimony against Elias Drake and the UIB collaborators. The room went utterly silent. The entire city, watching on screens, waited for the mafia boss to do what he always did: negotiate, leverage, protect his power. Before Nero could answer, a man in the third row stood up. It was one of Nero's former captains, the one who had called him soft. "I have a confession," he shouted, waving a piece of paper, his face a mask of false righteousness. "The UIB is offering me a deal." It was her. The girl, she was the mole all along. She used the Lantern Clinic to feed Valente information on Cade. It was a desperate, chaotic smear, a last-ditch effort by Elias's remaining moles to muddy the waters, to shift the blame, to give the corrupt faction a single thread of plausible deniability. The cameras swung wildly, focusing on Mira. Nero's body went rigid, his good hand clenched into a fist at his side. He took a step, his shadow falling over the man. But Mira moved first. She put a hand on his chest, stopping him. She did not look afraid. She did not look surprised. She looked, finally, angry. She walked past Nero, past the prosecutor, and stood at the central podium, adjusting the microphone to her height. The room hushed. The only sound the click and whir of cameras. "My name is Mira Solis," she said, her voice clear and amplified, echoing through the hall. It held no tremor, only the steady authority of the Halcyon Tunnel. "I am an EMT. I do not traffic in information. I traffic in life." She recounted every minute: the tunnel, the clinic, the overdose in the rain, the construction site, the child. She looked directly into the main broadcast camera, her gaze bypassing the politicians and the lawyers, speaking directly to the city. "For my entire life in Greyhaven, I have been invisible," she said, "and for the last month, I have been treated like bait. I am not invisible, and I am not bait. I am a witness, and this is the truth." "She is right," Nero's voice cut in. He walked to stand beside her, his good hand placing a small, black hard drive on the podium. The sound was a definitive click. "The confession you just heard is a lie, orchestrated by Elias Drake. This," he tapped the drive, "is the truth, not just the parking garage video, the entire ledger, every laundered dollar Elias filtered to Vera Cade, every dirty cop on the UIB payroll who helped him do it. The metadata is intact." He turned, not to the captain, but to the special prosecutor. "I will sign the Greyhaven Revitalization Pact. I will turn over Arcadia Holdings to full, public, independent audits. I will do it today. In exchange, I want legal amnesty for every low-level employee of the Valente Syndicate who had no part in the violence, the men who drive the trucks, not the men who pull the triggers. They get to keep their jobs." It was a total surrender of his underworld. The captain in the third row saw his life ending. The UIB deal was smoke. Elias was gone. He was exposed. He panicked. His hand darted to his ankle holster, pulling a small, silver pistol. The room screamed. Vince, Nero's deputy, who had been standing guard, moved. He shoved the prosecutor down just as the gun fired. The shot was loud and deafening in the enclosed space, grazing Vince's arm. Nero did not reach for a weapon. He did exactly what he had promised. He grabbed Mira, spinning her around, shielding her with his own body and tackling her to the floor behind the heavy oak podium. "Drop the weapon," he roared, his voice a command, not a threat, directed at the C-Cob officers. Police swarmed the gunman, subduing him in seconds. The crisis was over. Nero stayed on the floor for a long second, his good arm wrapped tightly around Mira, his heart hammering against her back. He had kept his word. Slowly, he stood, pulling Mira up with him. The hall was silent for a beat. Then, one person in the back row began to clap, then another, then the entire room. It was not applause for a gangster. It was applause for the choice, for the abdication of violence. live, for the entire city to see. Mira turned to Nero, really looking at him. The jealousy that had driven him wild, the possessive, blind fire that had made him so dangerous, was gone. His eyes, fixed on hers, were just clear. The mask was gone. The dawn broke cold and sharp over Celadon Tower. They stood on the roof, the wind whipping at them, the city sprawling below, bruised but awake. He was still in his suit. She was still in her uniform. She shivered, and Nero, wincing slightly, took his arm out of the sling. He did not give her his suit jacket. He took her worn, blue EMT jacket, the one he had draped on her in the power outage. From where she had laid it over a vent, he gently, reverently, slipped it over her shoulders, a reversal of roles. "You save people," he said, his voice quiet against the wind. "I am learning how." She zipped up the jacket. It was her armor. They walked to the very edge of the roof, the drop severe, the view infinite. He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. She turned to him. He leaned down, and their final kiss was a vow. It was slow and deep and warm against the morning chill. It was the taste of the salt wind from the river, the soft, sure pressure of his lips, the solid wall of his chest meeting hers. His good arm wrapped around her, pulling her close, and her hands came up to frame his face. They breathed each other in, a shared rhythm, a single heartbeat in the vast open air. "Home," he whispered against her mouth. "Home is here." Greyhaven would not change in a night. The corruption ran too deep. But on that roof, as the sun rose, two people had laid the first brick, and the blinding, savage jealousy that had once driven Nero Valente to the edge of madness had finally, completely, been shattered not by power or by force, but by the simple, terrifying act of truly seeing the woman who had been invisible for so long. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, give this video a like, and support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by many more.